All right, thank you very much, Joseph Otsem, for that background report. And to begin our conversation, let me introduce here in the studio Dr. Kabir Adamu. He's a security and management risk expert. A pleasure to welcome you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
The pleasure is mine. Good morning.
All right, and we have also been joined here in the studio by Wing Commander Musa Salman, retired development, peace and security expert. Good to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
You mind?
And we also have joining us from Maiduguri, Professor Osman Tar, Commissioner, Ministry of Information and Internal Security in Borno State. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
With you, Honorable Commissioner, how did we get here again? What's the situation now in Borno? Is there a change in the number of casualties, and what would you say went wrong years after?
Thank you very much. On 29th of June 2024, at about 3:40, a female suicide bomber with a child wrapped on her back attacked a wedding party in Goza. 1 hour later, another female suicide bomber attacked a funeral party for the victims of the IED attack. An hour later, another teenager suicide bomber attacked a checkpoint where civilian JTF and some soldiers were fatally wounded. Now, this event should be taken in context. For the past 7 years, Goza has not experienced any form of terrorist attack. And terrorist attacks in Borno, Greater Borno, has reduced significantly. And as the governor said, all the 27 local government areas of Borno State are no longer under any influence of the Boko Haram insurgents. The concerted effort of the multi-agency, joint task force and Operation Hardin Kai have ensured that terrorism, Boko Haram, is significantly degraded using the kinetic approach. The Borno State government and the federal government of Nigeria have also invested heavily in the non-kinetic approach. So what we are having is a group of terrorists that were seriously degraded, that were looking for an opportunity to embarrass the efforts of the government. Also, the Borno State government has begun work in decommissioning all the IDP camps in the state, starting with the state capital. As I speak to you, 90% of IDP camps in Maiduguri have been closed down and the people have been returned back. The resettlement effort of the Borno State government is also on course. The governor declared in December at the budget speech, 2024 budget speech, that villages and towns will all be resettled. This has not gone down well with the Boko Haram terrorists. And around the Goza mountain, the Mandara mountain, the Boko Haram have been pushed to the Mandara mountains. So they are looking for a space to ventilate, and this they did. Just like 9/11 happened, 29/6 happened in Goza. It was very unfortunate, but it is the fallout of the degradation of the Boko Haram insurgency.
To stay with you, because this unfortunate and tragic event underscores the need for enhanced security, and in Goza, it was a well-coordinated attack between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. and they were all women, and the last one was a teenage girl. Now, can you tell us the current measures, being put in place to checkmate these attacks? Because you and I know we lived in Maiduguri, and we know how Boko Haram can coordinate an attack. But in a situation where there's resettlement of people in a place like Goza, and the Mandra Hills is giving them a place to hide, I would like to ask you one fundamental question. What happened to the civilian JTF that I know were there to, check people coming into town, check people going out, and the way they moved in this coordinated attack is like it used to be before. So what happened to the civilian JTF who used to keep an eye on occurrences like that in Borno State? We seem not to hear anything about them anymore.
Thank you very much. The civilian JTF work very closely with the armed forces, and they are deployed all over the state. They are doing their job very well. This is just an unfortunate event, and probably the suicide attackers did not follow the normal channel of transportation. Probably they were smuggled into Goza, and for that we could not blame the civilian JTF. But I assure you that civilian JTF, their capacity has been increased. They undergo training, in warfare, in arms handling, and in checkpoint, management, and they are doing very well. But for this particular event, it could well be that the attackers were smuggled into Goza. That was very unfortunate.
And given what has happened, how are you looking after those that are in the hospital and the others who may be injured around Goza?
Thank you very much. Yesterday at about 5 o'clock, the acting governor of Borno State, His Excellency Alhaji Umar Usman Kadafur, flanked by the Senator representing Borno South, Senator Alindume, and the member representing Goza, Honorable Babao, and other top government functionaries, visited the Maiduguri Borno State Specialist Hospital, where all the injured were transported and are being cared for. The governor expressed his agony, and he assured the victims that they will be catered for, on the cost of the Borno State government. Instantly, the governor pledged 5 million naira and also pledged to continue to support all the victims. As for the dead ones, they were all, buried according to Islamic injunction, and the cost was, borne by the Borno State government. Immediately after the hospital visit, the governor and the acting governor and top government functionaries went round Maiduguri to visit the homes of the deceased and offered the government's condolences to the people. So as I speak to you, the governor, the acting governor, and top government functionaries are on a helter-skelter situation, going around and providing succor to the people. This morning, the governor is to visit Goza in order to go and condole with the people and to provide assurances to the people. So the Borno State government is not resting on her oars in order to ensure that this unfortunate event does not repeat itself, and those who are affected by this event are catered for. The government has officially condoled the families of those who are affected by this incident.
We seem not to have an accurate figure, Professor Tar, of the dead or the wounded, and so far we hear that no organization has claimed responsibility for the bombing in Goza. Can you give us some of the figures?
Thank you very much. We dispatched the Borno State Emergency Management Agency. The CEO of the agency, Dr. Saidu Barkindo, is on ground. He has been on ground the moment the event happened, and he has been providing real-time information, intelligence on the ground. Also, the DPO of Goza is on ground, providing detailed information. The initial figure was 10 deaths and about 20 injury. But this number keeps increasing, and we cannot tell for sure is the exact number until the final assessment is done. It is a work in progress. It's an ongoing operation in order to determine numbers, determine factors, and also get into the root of the subject matter. So as I speak to you, the number stands at 15 deaths and 20 injuries.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Tar. We will get back to you shortly, just so that we bring the conversation to the studio here. And let me go to Dr. Kabir Adamu. We've experienced what we have, some have forgotten for many years now. And what would you say could have gone wrong? Because if we manage to keep something off for years and suddenly it reoccurs, could it be that we became complacent?
Thank you. Just like Professor Ta mentioned, Borno State has done commendably well over the last few years in improving security, of course, together with the federal government. The Borno model is a model for addressing insecurity, especially the type that affects local populations. That is being spoken about not just in Nigeria but across the globe. And principally, that model was developed locally, of course, with the support of our development partners. So to that extent, I think the state deserves commendation and deserves all the support it needs in this crucial period in time. Now, having said that, the ecosystem for terrorism is one that, and I'm really happy with the topic of conversation that you picked on, resilience. Resilience of the population is the only way to defeat terrorism. So where gaps exist that can be exploited by the terrorist, they are going to exploit it. And unfortunately, that is what we saw at the moment. Counter-terrorism essentially has two components. The counter-terrorism component, which is done by the government, in this instance the federal and the state government, just like I mentioned, there is Operation Hadinkai, and then there is the Borno State model that are concurrently being implemented together, and they've been largely effective in, like the commissioner said, in degrading the terrorist group. But the other one that is also significant is anti-terrorism. That is those measures that the population can on their own take to reduce the influence and the penetration, as it were, of the terrorist groups. So as an example, a physical space, you are having an event. What kind of physical security measures would you put in place that would allow you to detect if a suicide bomber is coming to that place? The second component is what if it's a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device? What kind of measures are you going to place? It's not really the government that will do most of that. It is you, the event organizer, that will probably, in conjunction with the government, put in place those measures. So what we know at the moment, and I think Jummai mentioned it, no group as yet has taken responsibility for this particular attack.
We're just assuming.
But well, there are what we call signatures. Every time there's an attack, there are signatures. If you are a forensic investigator, you look at those signatures. The current disposition of most analysts, including myself, is that it could be one of the two terrorist groups that are operational in that region, specifically the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah lil-Dawati wal-Jihad. In the past, it was the one that was deploying female suicide bombers. And so some of those signatures align with our knowledge of what that particular group would do. The other thing that is also an indicator is the type of bomb that was deployed, the materials that were put together for that bomb to become the explosive that it has become. I'm happy that the commissioner has said, and I have a lot of respect for the commissioner. He's someone that I've followed while he was lecturing, and of course even while he's where he is. So I'm hoping that that knowledge would also be put in place so that all of these little things that I've mentioned, like the materials, when the police, in particular the ordnance unit of the police that is on ground, they will pick up those materials, bring them to the lab, and then do an investigation and find out those signatures so that they can pinpoint where those bombs came from. It would go a long way towards preventing further attacks. Now, having said that, as you know, I run a company, and we do have an intelligence department where we keep data. What surprised us, and I'm hoping that the commissioner would corroborate this, the last time we saw an increase in the number of fatalities caused by IEDs, to the extent that we saw in Q1 2024, that is January to March, was in 2022. So in other words, we are seeing an increase in the number of IEDs that are being deployed by the two groups, terrorist groups that are active in Borno State and the Lake Chad Basin as a whole. In essence, if we had done what we were supposed to do, we should have known that this attack is potentially possible. Because when you look at the data, like I said, 2022, Q1 2022, that's the last time we saw, in particular, there were 47 incidents in 2022, while in Q1 2024, there were 48 incidents. Now, those incidents led to the death of almost about 80 persons. The last time we saw that, again, is in 2022. So if you've been monitoring the trend, you would have known that there is an acquisition of materials for making IEDs by this group, even though most of the IEDs, or in fact all, were road-planted IEDs. But it's very easy to move from those road-planted IEDs to suicide bombs or to VEI IEDs. The same material. The only difference is on this occasion, they are putting them on a human body and they are deploying the person. So if we had taken note of that trend, it would have told us principally that it's very possible for these people to move. And groups like mine have raised that concern. We release reports monthly. We raised that kind of awareness to tell not just the Borno State government, but of course our security forces, that this is the trend we're seeing. And the essence of that trend is, as a security manager, you now ask yourself, if this is a potential threat, how do you mitigate it? Like I mentioned at the beginning of my conversation, there is counter-terrorism and there is anti-terrorism. Anti-terrorism would mean public sensitization and awareness, where you now tell people the measures that they can take to reduce the access that these bad people would have to. And we did that in from 2014 actually, up until 2021, 22, when the prevalence of IEDs was extremely high. A lot of public awareness and sensitization was done. In fact, at that point, one of the government that was in place at that time attempted to stop women from wearing hijab, and there was a lot of public. So we need to go back to that, to have that type of public sensitization and awareness on anti-terrorism measures, so that the public would support what the government. Again, I want to conclude this statement by saying that I'm really delighted and happy with what both the Borno State government and the federal government have been able to achieve in Borno State. Let's not allow it to be reversed.
Yes, inshallah, it will not be reversed, because Governor Zulum is really working hard to ensure that things like this do not happen again. We have to return to Professor Tar in Maiduguri. Yes, before we come to Weak Commander, so yeah, because we hear he has another appointment, you know. And if you're listening to me, we would like to talk about the community itself. How are they coping with what just happened? Because we know Goza is a very, very business-oriented environment, and a lot of people have relocated to Goza. They are now living there. You know, their life is going on. How are they coping with what just happened? And what is the sustainable solution to insecurity around that area? Because the Mandara Mountains provides a hideout for these terrorists. And how far would the security operatives go to make sure that, you know, bombers don't come down the route of the Mandara Hills itself, instead of, you know, because if they come by the road, they will be arrested. So how can they be stopped from coming down from the Mandara Hills to perpetrate such a heinous attack again in a place like Goza?
Thank you very much. The Multinational Joint Task Force, Operation Lake Sanity 2, is ongoing, and it has reached the Goza area, and indeed the whole of Borno State is feeling the heat of the Lake Sanity 2 operations, and it is going very well. In addition to this, the Operation Hardin K has also upped its ante in terms of taking the battle to the enemy. And what we need in the Goza, Mandara Hills, is to increase capacity for aerial reconnaissance and attack on these terrorists. We have, from all indications, they have been cornered to the Mandara Mountains, and they are looking for excuses and opportunities to embarrass the government. And with the combined efforts of the Multinational Joint Task Force, the Operation Hardin K, and in particular, aerial support from the Nigerian Air Force, we are hopeful that these terrorists will meet their Waterloo. And it will be very difficult for them to carry out such an attack. What we are seeing is a desperate attempt at a very desperate time for the terrorists to, show that they still have capacity for attack. Recall that the Borno model for peace, reconciliation, and development, under which we operate the, a safety, a pathway for return of the terrorists, has succeeded in bringing out over 160,000 persons that were either directly involved in acts of terrorism or they were trapped in the lines of fire. And they have all been camped. Some of them have been rehabilitated, particularly the low risk and the farmers who were trapped in the line of violence. This has kind of infuriated the insurgents, and it appears they are carrying out this attack. And from all indications, we are hopeful that this kind of event will not repeat itself again, because the civilian JTF and the armed forces and security agencies will be on the lookout. They will change their tactics. This thing happened because of matters that we did not foresee. That the terrorists that we say are degraded are now developing capacity for sporadic attack. This is a sporadic attack. We did not see it coming, and inshallah it will not repeat itself again. Borno State government will continue to support the armed forces, the civilian JTF, and all our security agencies in order to make sure that this kind of the event does not happen, not only in Goza, but throughout Borno State, inshallah. The Borno State Security Council sits every month in order to assess the security situation. As I said earlier, attacks have reduced. The Boko Haram insurgents have been returning in large numbers. And what we are seeing is just the few diehards that are holding on to terrorism. And we continue to present the olive branch to them. If they are willing to surrender unconditionally, the door is open for them. But if they are not willing to surrender unconditionally, no matter what they will do, our security agencies will face them, and they will deal with them decisively. As for the people of Goza, and indeed the people of Borno State, we are resilient people. We will not give in to terrorism. We will not give in to any form of intimidation, and we will continue to live our lives no matter what. And we will make sure we will give all our support to the armed forces in order to ensure that the kinetic operation goes on, while also giving room for the non-kinetic operation to carry on. The armed forces Operation Safe Corridor is on if they want to surrender, and the Borno model for peace, reconciliation, and development is also open if these terrorists are willing to return back. What I'm saying is without prejudice to the fact that no group has so far taken responsibility for the attack. But as the other speaker said, the signature is very clear. The MO is very clear. It is very easy to pinpoint who the attacker is. But the final analysis will show who the attackers are.
Professor Tar, just before we let you go, a quick couple of questions. One is, given what has happened, do you still think that the reintegration of so-called repentant terrorists is still a great idea? That's one. Is it true? Can you confirm if a suicide bomber was arrested in Monguno? And finally, how are the people in Goza coping at the moment?
Thank you very much. The Borno model for peace, reconciliation, and development is a viable model. As I said earlier, over 160 people have surrendered, have returned to the camp. This is a huge number. And those that are left, the few ones that refuse to come back, should not belittle or defray the strength of materials in the Borno model. So that is one. As for the terrorists, as the suspected terrorist attack in Monguno, I am not aware. I have not received any information on that. But as soon as I receive, I will call your manager and let him know. As for the resilience of the people of Goza, the people of Goza are traders and many are farmers. They are very resilient people, and this kind of event will not discourage them from carrying on their daily activities. And they are assured by the armed forces and by the Borno State government that inshallah this event will not repeat itself. And this same pledge, I wish to present the same pledge to the people of Borno that inshallah the safety of their life and property is sacrosanct, and government will do its best to ensure that people are safe to go about their normal businesses. On this note, I wish to thank, on behalf of the Borno State government, the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, for providing all the support to the armed forces in order to carry out their activities. This, isolated event should not becloud the good intentions and achievements of the federal government and the state government in ensuring that terrorism is handled squarely. And the Borno State Governor, His Excellency Professor Babagana Umara Zulum, has worked assiduously in order to provide all the support that the armed forces need. And also, the idea of the Borno model is his idea. He called the people in August 2021 in order to come up with the idea of opening a space for the terrorists to surrender unconditionally. For this bold attempt and effort, we commend His Excellency the Governor of Borno State.
Of Borno State should be commended. From the time he was commissioner to now, we've seen him go to the deepest part of Borno State, spend nights there, interact with the community and ensure that their safety is top on his list. Professor Usman Tar, Commissioner, Ministry of Information and Internal Security, Borno State, the prayers of Nigerians are with you in Borno. We thank you so much for coming, and good morning, Nigeria, this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
Well, we are returning back to the studio, and we Commander Musa Salman, who has been retired, has been patiently, waiting, and I'm sure he has been listening to everything that has been, said. Now, let's get your opinion on this coordinated attack in Goza, and how can this be allowed to happen first, and how can it be stopped from happening again?
Okay, well, thank you so much. Well, I share the sentiments of the other speakers, very great people. Professor Tai is my lecturer, and Kabir has been someone that we work so much with. But I want to pick on the issue of the anti-terrorism issues that he talked about, which to me are most times where there have been violent conflict over a period of time, or mass atrocities have been committed over a period of time, the people become the most important component of whether those atrocities, violent conflict continues, or there is even a solution, and how sustainable that solution becomes. So, like we've heard, 7 years and the pattern and so on. So it all boils down to what we are doing at the community level, community-based security processes or activities and so on. What is the awareness that is being created, how preemptive that society is, and what are the measures that are put in place? Like we saw, the bombers might be people from within, known by the people maybe, and so there's that I wouldn't call it laxity, but then you wouldn't expect that it's coming. But then that is what they take opportunity, or the gap that is being exploited. So whenever you're moving from violent conflict, maybe very hostile situation, to where we are in Borno, where there are talks about stabilization, people are being reintegrated or rehabilitation, we shouldn't forget the fact that there will be hardliners on both sides, or both sides of the conflict and so on. People that want this to continue. And those people will do everything possible. And when I say people with all sense of humility, it could be on all sides. It could be on the terrorist side and the counter terrorism side of it because of various reasons, the benefits people are getting, and so on. So there and other interests, of course. So those are things that we have to look at. Who are the spoilers? We have to kind of segment them and say, okay, what these spoilers, what are they capable of doing? What can they do? Then when we do that and kind of say, then we can now come up with measures that will. But if we think that everybody, both both sides, everybody will be happy with what is going on and that this peace is gradually returning, people are picking up their pieces and getting back to this, then it will show that we are a bit naive about the entire thing. And these are reasons, even in all studies, that shows that there is possibility of relapse in every situation. So you have to watch out consistently or continuously watch out for that. While the kinetic actions are going on, looking at what are the root causes. They have to be addressed. What are the root causes? How do you strengthen communities so that they take responsibility for their own security and they take responsibility for ensuring that the process moves on? And what are those things that can be done? How do you support those communities? So it is at a stage that I think with all the measures that are put in place, that the community becomes the major focus. Even the reintegration that we're talking about, how well are we doing that reintegration? How well is the community very much involved in a way that we know that there will be true reintegration and kind of transitional justice mechanisms? Because, I mean, let's face it, when there are mass atrocities, people have been affected. They know the people that committed these heinous crimes. I'm talking about generally now when you're trying to, so what do you do? Is it enough for people to say, okay, well, we have rehabilitated them somewhere and we're bringing them back to join you, the community? What is that grievance? Because the people who lost their loved ones are still there boiling, even if they cannot say anything, but they're there. So beyond what is happening, beyond the rehabilitation, what are the efforts to ensure that there is some level of accountability? Because that is what people are looking for. If you have lost your loved one, you want to see some level of, even if it's something like an open apology by that person, the perpetrator, whom sometimes you know. Mm-hmm. So we have to adopt those. That's going forward, I mean, beyond this, so on, and so that we have something that is viable, something that is sustainable, so that we don't have a relapse into back to where we're coming from. Studies have shown that most of this, they relapse within the first 5-7 years. So how do we avoid that? How do we avoid going back? Because it's from that pool of disgruntled or kind of people that are not happy that the pool of that the Boko Haram get, even this would be suicide bombers or even their cadres that they work with. So the community for me is very key. For community that's at this level, a lot of anti-terrorism activities, as Dr. Adamu has clearly stated, I think should be the focus. Of course, not, downplaying the issue of the kinetic. We have seen that, and we have seen that it has worked very well. Now let's work on the communities, the community part of it. For me, that's what would stop.
Yes, so working on the community, but I need to ask you this question. Was security sort of relaxed?
Well, it's human, or especially in this part of the country. I mean, let's face it, when things start getting normal, you find out that the SOPs and so on begin to, either as individuals or communities, will begin to relax. In the past, every event that you went to here, there were measures, physical measures put in place to ensure that we do not have the likelihood of that, because people were kind of up to tax and so on. So there's that aspect of being relaxed. Normalcy is returning. People feel that they're going back to their normal activities and so on and so forth. So, and that is what the hardliners, if I'll call them, or the spoilers from Bollywood can take opportunity of. That gap, the feeling that people are relaxed, nobody, look at the choice of targets. is where people are congregated. First, you talk about the wedding ceremony, then the prayer session or the funeral, then the hospital that those people are. So it was, they knew that this is what would be. If this, then there will be this, then there will be. So we need to also be ahead of the game to kind of anticipate. And in the past, some of these measures were being put in place where if they were, so yes, there's the level of people feeling slightly relaxed because over a period of time, this have not happened. But as he has said, that there's been this trend, and we must work with the people like them that have the capacity to analyze these issues. Because everything that happens does not happen in a vacuum. And until we're able to relate A and B and relate and see what is the trend or what is, then we will miss out a lot of things. That is the only way we can project and anticipate and therefore act in advance to forestall and prevent these issues from happening.
All right. Wing Commander Salmanu, thank you very much for your comments. Let me get to Dr. Kabir Adamu again. He's alluded to it. I had asked Professor Tar before he left, you know, or rather he said they didn't see it coming. And I wonder if this is not a failure of intelligence. We are supposed to see it coming. We are supposed to anticipate it.
Let's not kid ourselves. It is a failure of intelligence. Intelligence is bandied around by most persons without really understanding what it is. And in today's world, intelligence is available. You just need to harvest it. And one of the things that we have been trying to encourage both the federal and state government is to learn to harvest that intelligence. Wing Commander Salmanu has given indicators of how those intelligence can be harvested. It is rooted in the people. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, under the immediate past Office of the National Security Advisor, he, under realizing the components that are put together to produce an IED, targeted urea in particular in fertilizer. And a committee was set up that came up with measures to reduce access to urea and other components of fertilizer. That is a key component to the assembling of that bomb. For all intents and purposes, I do not know if those measures are still in place. For an IED to be assembled, there are materials that are put together. And what intelligence would do is to make sure every time someone who is not known to not be a farmer purchases a particular item, that there is someone within the intelligence cycle that is aware, and that person, through the intelligence fusion cycle, highlights it, and the public security departments are able to know that, look, this has happened, and so they now start putting in place measures to forestall the occurrence of an attack. Those measures are already there, but once something like that is highlighted, then you have levels. In security management, we color them, probably from green up until black. It's a spectrum. So if you are in a relaxed period where there are no indicators, you are at green. Once there is that purchase and you already start seeing the links coming together, you move to, say, yellow, orange, up until red. I do not think in Nigeria we have this type of system in place. Even if we do, it is not being implemented. So this is a specific call for action, not call to action, to the Office of the National Security Advisor, the Ministry of Defense, to bring, he's outlined them, so I don't want to repeat them over again. We need to bring the community into this process. Make sure we come up with this risk management categorization that would now bring in the people into the security management system so that they understand the role, both in terms of harvesting the information that will allow public security intelligence departments. The DSS is there, DI is there, NIA is there, all of them. Because we're assuming that this is the materials were purchased in Nigeria. What if they were purchased from neighboring Cameroon or neighboring Chad? So this is not just something that should be domiciled in Nigeria, we have to also partner with our neighboring countries so that whatever we're doing, they're also doing, and that there is the sharing of that intelligence. But principally, there is a failure of intelligence. In building community resilience, which, by the way, is a vast topic in development cycles, there are two key things that you look out for, what are called stressors and shocks. Stressors are long-term issues that affect communities. So economic issues like he's mentioned, grievances that have not been addressed, which is what they principally exploit women to recruit when they are recruiting them. So they can go to the woman and tell her that, is it not the military that killed your husband? Or is it not the military that killed your children? You know, things like that. And then they recruit them. And then, you know, before you know, indoctrinate them up to a point where they're able to put the suicide vest on them and deploy them. So those are indicators of stressors that exist in the community. We need to, as a people, look at those stressors. And then shocks. Shocks are like specific things that happen that turn the tide. So as an example, somebody goes to buy, who is not a farmer, goes to buy 2 bags of fertilizer, or he goes to buy cones or whatever cylinder of gas or things like that. Because IEDs can be contracted with different things. And we need to know, that's why I said gather the evidence, identify the signature so that you know how the component was put together. And then that would allow the public security departments to start looking out for who bought that thing, how it was deployed, and then arrests can be made. That's the only way to prevent a reoccurrence. If we know how it was done, who was involved, what materials were purchased, so that in the long run it can be prevented. There are certain other components that, because this is a public place, I wouldn't want to say too much, but intelligence, unfortunately, in my honest opinion, in Nigeria, needs to be improved.
Yes, it needs to be improved, and if we could go back in history before Boko Haram became what Boko Haram is, it started with the Taliban in Yobe State in 2005. And when they were kicked out of Yobe State, the first place they went to was the Mandra Hills, which shares the same border with Cameroon, because I've been there. It's just like a step. I'm here in Nigeria and Victor is in Cameroon. And most of it, like the commissioner said, they must have been smuggled. So they must have been smuggled down from the mountains itself. And recently on Facebook, we see a lot of women missing, a lot of children missing. This was the trend before the bombing started in Borno at that time in 2009. And would you say that the missing people are linked sort of to what Boko Haram is trying to say? And although they have not claimed responsibility, we know there's ISWAP, but technically they are all the same, sort of separated along the way. The porosity of our borders too is an issue here, especially in places like Goza area, because we all know that Goza area is a hub for Boko Haram terrorists to train.
Yes. The porosity of our borders is a huge challenge, and like I've mentioned, whatever we do, our neighboring countries too would have to do it. That's the only way we can bring this to an end. But I don't want us to also make assumptions that the suicide bombers came from across or from Mandara Mountains. No, let the investigation reveal what actually happened, because it's very possible that they could have been indoctrinated internally.
Yes.
The grievances are there. I use the word stressors and shocks. They're there with us, both the stressors and shocks. The level of poverty at the moment, the fact that people have been killed and there is no justice system that had addressed the hatred and the grievance that was generated by that killing. So if I am a recruiter, those are the things that I would look at. I would sit back and say, okay, there's this particular family that is grieving, and then I go and manipulate that family.
Why I'm saying that is, I'm not trying to interrupt you, is because when some of the suicide bombers were arrested in Maiduguri, most of them were incoherent. They didn't even know where they were. They were so drugged up, they were just told to walk towards a place, and just detonate the bomb. So when you talk of indoctrinating them, and then if they're indoctrinated, they will go in fully aware of what they were doing. But in most cases, these suicide bombers didn't know where they were. They were drugged up.
Jume, let's not isolate issues. The scenario you are describing, it's that the drugging is the last resort, as it were, to reduce failure. Another thing they could possibly do, apart from giving the what did they even call it? No. I've forgotten the technical name, but the device that sets off the bomb, the explosive. There could be another person within the crowd or away from the crowd, that if the suicide bomber fails to detonate it, would detonate it. So point is, it's a safe guard measure. The drugging is a safeguard measure to reduce failure. But the actual indoctrination takes place. Before you get someone to strap a bomb on herself, and with a child who is most likely her child, you made the level of indoctrination is deep. They would use so many things. They will use grievances, like I said, maybe her husband has been killed or her child. They would do that. Another one they use is cultural component, where women, for instance, are not seen as functional within societies. They now give her that purpose that if you die, you go to heaven, as an example, because you've been able to help achieve that. And then all of a sudden she sees herself. So all of this needs to be understood. I don't want us to sit here and assume, for instance, that there is only one thing, such as the drugging. There are so many things that are put in place before they eventually do that. And like I said, apart from the detonator was the word I was looking for, apart from giving the detonator to the suicide bomber, because there are different types of bombs. One could be where the suicide bomber himself or herself is holding the detonator. Then you will now have someone else who is within that environment, depending on type of bomb, that if the suicide bomber fails to detonate it, he or she would detonate it far away. So there are several things for our public security departments to take note of. What is more important is for them to gather the evidences, go to a lab, try to put together back the bomb, identify how it was, manufactured, who did it. They know it. Honestly, every bomb maker has a signature.
Yes.
And if you are in the practice, you would know the signature. So once they know, it will be easy for them to say, okay, this is the likely person who assisted in making that bomb. And then, of course, it would lead to a couple of other things. But I want to emphasize the relevance of ensuring that the ordnance department of both the police, the DSS, the military, they go to task to identify these signatures. And of course, in conclusion, at the moment, this is a good period for intelligence gathering if they've not done it before, both from open sources and then from human sources. So their ears should be on ground to pick up different aspects of information that they can put together to identify what happened. Because there will be chatter, and I can bet you, if it's either the Jamaat al-Ahl Sunnah lil-Dawati wal-Jihad, which is most likely the case, or the Islamic State in West Africa province, they would take responsibility for it eventually.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Now let me get to Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, again retired. We've talked a bit about intelligence. You have alluded to it earlier, but how do we begin to step it up? This is supposed to be the tough, the forte of the DSS particularly, and I do know that other security agencies have their own intelligence arms. So how do we foster collaboration and enhancement of intelligence? Because at the end of the day, prevention will, win it over trying to, do these repairs.
Well, so yes, I think that we have a situation of even over-information or over-intelligence. The problem that I think we have is the ability to process and make it actionable and kind of actually act on that. And which comes with not only, so it comes with issue of able to decipher and kind of analyze it to that, but also the collaboration between the various intelligence members of the intelligence community or the organizations, like you alluded to there. We have a lot of them, and everybody is harvesting. Everyone is getting information and so on, and even the private.
But are they working together?
Exactly. So this is where that is where the ball is let down, where people, first of all, if agency A has intelligence, how much does it share it with agency B and does not keep it to itself? Even when it's aware that its agency B is more likely to be the most appropriate to act on that intelligence. There are efforts. I mean, there are the joint intelligence committees and so on that meet regularly and so on. But how does it reflect on the ground is something that we have to look at and kind of say how well that is done. I know up to the level of the NSA and all those organizations that you listed have meetings, and even at the operational level they do have those meetings and kind of try to say, okay, let's share this intelligence and so on. But the effectiveness is how well it's able to deter or kind of prevent these events like this. And to be fair to them, a lot of this have been prevented. It's like football. Nobody talks about what has been the ball or the goal that has been stopped. Mm-hmm. Everybody talks about that goal that was scored.
Because that's what determines who wins the match.
Exactly. So there is that. So there is the need to step up this game. There is need to react to this. And there's the need to kind of find out, because what happens is that there could be this information or security or intelligence, when it's analyzed, could be overwhelming. So you have to be careful when there are false intelligence and people act. There's the likelihood that when the next one comes, you start thinking, does it look like the last one that we acted on and it didn't? So there could be that temptation not to act, and that might be the one that is actually, because they could throw up, even the adversary could throw up something that is a false alarm, throw up, you gather your intelligence, you do everything. When you are acting, they are not going to act then. But when they are sure that you have kind of said that anything that looks like this perhaps is going to be that's when they really act. So you can't completely sometimes, even when in the best societies with the best security or intelligence arrangements, some of these slips do happen. However, what makes the difference is what he's talking about, that when this happens, how do you analyze it? How do you kind of get more intelligence from that? And how do you ensure that this does not happen again? And how are you able to anticipate? Because there are also, like we say then when we're in the academy, the enemy also thinks far ahead.
And also gathers intelligence.
He also gathers intelligence on you, and so he might have someone that is telling him this is what the thinking is, and so on and so on. So it's a chess game, kind of a game of chess, where everybody is looking at what's
the next step.
What's the next step? So you have to anticipate. You have to use everything at your disposal, no matter how ridiculous sometimes the information looks like. You have to investigate it. You have to, and if you need to share it timely, right? And so that it can be acted upon. And also the agencies must know that when information or intelligence comes from another agency, because there's also the likelihood, it came from the other agency, so it's not really, it's not something we should act on or dissipate energy or even resources on. We must go away from that. The whole idea is that at the end of the day, we want people to be protected. So whether the information is coming from any of the agencies, once you are able to, there's credibility to that, please act on it. And that's the only way you can reduce to the barest minimum. But I want to really, because slightly away from this, I want to also emphasize, he has said this, the issue of the stressors, because the Northeast is going down, but we are also in other theaters of operations. So that we don't make the same mistakes again. If we're making them, let's kind of correct and so on. During the counter-terrorist or counter-insurgency operations, mistakes are made sometimes. The mistakes create more people that are aggrieved and that are ready to actually, in fact, some of them volunteer themselves because of what has been done by security forces. So, and that's why sometimes in the past we used to engage with the security forces to say that during these operations, the focus is the people. How you treat the people determine whether you succeed in your counterinsurgency operations or you don't. Because you can be fighting and killing the insurgents or the terrorists or by whatever name they are. But if you do not take care of the people in a way that they feel that you are actually fighting for them, you're creating more people that can be recruited into that. So you're depleting the ranks of the terrorists or the
still
insurgents.
supply.
But there is willing supply here, not because of poverty alone, of course, yes, it's an element, but because people are aggrieved the way they were treated. So you have -5, but you have +20 coming in. Willingly, people are willing, and people are not even willing to cooperate with you because they feel they don't have that trust or they don't have that confidence that you're protecting them. So in our counterinsurgency or counter-terrorism operations, we have to also be careful how we engage. We have to be ensure that we don't create more lines of enemies while trying to solve some of these lines.
That was exactly what happened at the onset of Boko Haram before they were kicked out of Maiduguri. You kill one military guy, they go to the whole area, and it's chaos at that moment in time. Well, we'll come back to the conversation to find how to prefer solutions to the security challenges in the Northeast. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
The federal government of Nigeria warns vandals of national assets, electricity transmission towers, cables and other facilities to desist from this act of sabotage. Vandalism is a serious crime punishable under the law. Vandalizing electrical equipments will affect millions of Nigerians, including your loved ones. Remember that national assets belong to all of us, hence the need to protect them. Report all cases of suspicious movement around electrical facilities to security agencies. When you see something, say something. This message is from the Federal Ministry of Information and National Orientation in collaboration with the National Counter-Terrorism Center, NCTC, Office of the National Security Advisor.
You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria, and we've been discussing the suicide attack that happened in Borno State over the weekend, and our guests here are still seated. Kabir Adamu, I'll be coming to you. You know, we talked about, the psychological trauma people go through, but one thing I want us to talk about is the insurgency itself. Is a multi-billion-dollar business, and we cannot rule out shadow backers. People who sit comfortably in their house and, fuel this insurgency, give them money. We've seen cases of arrests being made with Bureau de Change, with calling them shadow backers, people as a conduit for money to the insurgents. How can we begin to gather more intelligence on these shadow backers? Because if they are arrested, if they are gotten by the security agencies, would you think that it will sort of lessen the impact of these attacks on Borno? Because we all know that they are making a statement. This is a statement that we are here, we have not dwindled, we are still here, and we can reach you anywhere you are in this country. It is a statement. How can this be told to the people that we need to watch out? You need to give us information. You need to let us know when a stranger comes into town, because that was how it used to be before. What is the role of the traditional rulers here in ensuring that they keep in check the number of people that come into their domain, and how can they watch out for this kind of attacks happening again?
Thank you, Jumai. As far as I know, traditional rulers are part of the Borno model. When the meeting that the Commissioner, Professor Tar, talked about in August 2021, if I remember well, they were part of that meeting. And so they've been instrumental in the development of the peace and reconciliation process that is ongoing in Borno State. Let's not forget that they were primary targets of the insurgency in Borno State. At a point, I do not think there was, apart from probably the Shehu of Borno, there was any traditional ruler in Borno State that was in his domain. They all had to relocate.
The Emir of Goza was killed.
So they, apart from being victims, they have now been made stakeholders in the entire process. But there are challenges to the current constitutional role that traditional rulers can play in Nigeria. It's a broad topic that we can't isolate Borno only and discuss. As we know what's happening currently in Kano, and then possibly in Sokoto, and then we're also here in Katsina. So the role of traditional rulers has been whittled down so badly by some political considerations. But I think from the point of view of security, it's absolutely important to bring in any leader, and I emphasize the word any leader. If you look at the countering violent extremism measure that is being implemented by the Office of the National Security Advisor, it identifies the roles of different stakeholders, including the traditional rulers, but more importantly, the media. That role is embedded in the recognition that all stakeholders have contributions to play. If you are a family member, as an example, father, mother, the type of value system that you instill in your kids would go a long way towards making them either law-abiding or not law-abiding. So despite the relevance and importance of these traditional rulers, I think it's best if we look at it from that wider approach where all stakeholders need to be identified. Anyone who has leadership responsibility is recognized, and his or her role is also identified in contributing to the security measures that we need to put in place within the society.
But who is, I just want to get a sense of this. Which office is responsible for coordinating intelligence?
Good question. The Office of the National Security Advisor, constitutionally, that office has responsibility for coordinating intelligence. If you look at the National Securities Act, I think 2006, that was amended, I can't remember the date of the amendment. It's that Office of the National Security Advisor. That office supervises the three key intelligence units that we have in the country. The State Security Service, otherwise called Department of State Service, the National Intelligence Agency, and then the Defense Intelligence Agency. That office...
I asked because if we still have agencies working in silos, not willing to share or struggling about who gets credit for this, and because of that, you are not able to put it together, is that a failure on the part of the Office of the National Security Advisor, whose responsibility it is to coordinate and deploy? Okay,
this is one instance where I would attempt not to answer your question directly, but I will take you back to the immediate past government, President Buhari. In 2015, immediately after he was inaugurated, he issued a directive, and I'm sure if you go look at your records, you will see that directive. He instructed the setting up of 2 fusion centers, intelligence fusion centers, one in the northeast in Borno and one here in Abuja. You are a journalist. I allow you to go and check whether those fusion centers have been set up, because he realized that we can't operate in silos. We cannot continue to operate in the manner that we're operating and achieve the objectives of our intelligence imperatives. So he made that directive. But as far as I know, those fusion centers have not. They may be existing physically, but in terms of their functioning, no. Because if they are, some of what is happening at the moment wouldn't have happened. The essence of intelligence is to forewarn.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are forewarned, the logical thing to do is to prevent. Now, apart from, if I sit down and start telling you the different indices for intelligence that we have, and how, as a non-public practitioner, I wonder why we still have this type of incidents in Nigeria, it worries me. We have an early warning center, I think Osprey, that is existing in the office of the Vice President, that is supposed to be pick up early warning systems. And so this is an independent body outside of the main intelligence community that we have. And then at the state level, you also have different early warning. Plateau State has, Kaduna State has, name them. So why is it that we still have this type of mass casualty events is what I don't understand. So I think that has answered your question. Yeah. The occupant of that office can do better in terms of making intelligence more effective and efficient. And where there are failures like this, it is imperative that the reasons for those failures are identified And then, of course, corrective measures are implemented. Just like my co-discussant has mentioned, in this era, you have more information than you actually need. All you need to do is to first be able to harvest it, and then more importantly, be able to analyze it. And incidentally, AI has even presented to us an easy way to analyze intelligence. Because of the volume of data, honestly, you can't use human mind to do it. So private players like myself have actually embraced AI, and it's helping. I told you that in Q1, we were able to know that around 80 people were killed. There were 47 incidents of the deployment of IEDs in Borno State alone. And we were able to identify the routes, locations where those IEDs were deployed. AI can help you easily in doing that. And if you want to even move it forward, you bring in GIS so that you can map it, and then through the mapping component, correlate it with the actual incidents themselves. Now you can also now bring adaptive intelligence to now say, if it happened in Q1, what is likely to happen in Q2? So that as a public security practitioner, if you do that adaptive intelligence and know what is likely to happen, you can now take measures to prevent them. Now, nobody would do that but the Office of the National Security Advisor. And I urge you, you are a journalist, approach them to find out if they are doing it. If they are not, then let them please know that it's possible to do it with very little cost.
Very little cost, and very little cost and effective at the same time. Now, let's bring in our weak Commander Salmana into the conversation now. As we begin to wind down, we should be talking about sustainable solutions to issues like this in Nigeria. It is not just in the northeast. The whole of the north itself is embroiled in insecurity, banditry, kidnapping, and just last week in Katsina they had a summit, and there was a lot of talk about preferring solutions to the insecurity and all that in the country. Well, what are the sustainable solutions to issues like this?
Well, it's a tough call, but let's look at the root causes. You know, I know, okay, you have to get into a situation whereby you can, because we have active violence or active conflict at the moment. So you have to use kinetic means and so on to get to a situation whereby you can deploy orders. Even while active conflict is going on, you are deploying them on beneath that conflict that is going. But then the moment you start where you have reached a situation whereby rehabilitation and so on starts going on, we cannot run away from those root causes that have left us to where we are. The issues of environments that provide this, issues of the grievances. Most of this crisis, when you look, whether it's in the northeast or the northwest, before it turns to criminality, it starts with some level of grievance. People are said we are not listened to, we're not getting justice for some kind of things that are done, and it reaches a stage that people feel, okay, if the justice is not provided, we have to resort to self-help. The moment people resort to self-help, then the response is also more violence, and the response is also more violence. So you find out that it now goes into a loop or a cycle of violence, getting to more violence. And it's also the issue of militarizing our security response or even security approach, where we feel every act of insecurity or every misdemeanor and so on should be responded with high-handedness and in a militarized form. So some of these things could actually be done through dialogue, mediations and so on. So I want us to look at those non-kinetic or non-violent approaches to security. Communities should be encouraged to dialogue among themselves. Those traditional, you're talking about traditional institutions. The traditional institutions must be respected for them to be even, so that people see them with that reverence that they used to have. In the past, before a situation could come to the formal judicial system, it's been handled by the local chiefs and so on and so forth. They could handle that, and whatever judgment they passed, I'm not saying that there were no abuses, but they were limited. Yes. whatever judgment they passed were being respected by the people that were affected and so on. So you had all issues settled at that. Now we have had a system whereby those are absent now, or they have been degraded, and so people have only the formal justice system, which seems to be absent, not to be, it's not quick, because something happens, it takes years for there to be any resolution, if there's any. So people, between that time, people are impatient. So the people don't even understand what is happening, and therefore they resort to self-help. So there is that, there's the issue, the socio-economic aspects of it, where we have to really look at what is happening with the issue of poverty, the incidences of poverty. How are people getting back to their farms or going to farms? Are people able to survive, and so on and so forth? The issue of out-of-school children, and so on and so forth. Then there's also the issue of whenever this happens, the response itself. When an incident happens, when security forces respond, you find out that there's this high-handedness, which does not, as I alluded earlier on, does not solve the problem. It rather compounds the problem. Now we gloss over issues, and therefore there are layers upon layers of issues and dissatisfaction. So political exclusion and so on. So grievance generally have to look at, and the socio-economic aspect of it. We have to address those fundamental issues. We have to look beyond the issue of using arms and so on and so forth. And the communities themselves. Communities must be engaged and involved in finding lasting solutions to these problems. Because apart from the fact that most problems, or solution to most problems, are at the lowest level, or those closest to that problem, there's the fact that even in the implementation, is the communities at the end of the day that is going to be implemented. Then you have to have that ownership and so on. So I think these and so many others, when we look at them, but try mostly to look at the root causes. And even the military keeps saying, the good governance. You can't, I know it's a very big elephant in the room, but you can't divorce the fact that until there is that element of good governance at the lowest level, then we are going to continue to have fertile grounds for all this. It takes just one person to feel aggrieved, then he has a lot of people to recruit from, and he creates a lot of meaning. Then the issue of course, the spaces that we live, either ungoverned or misgoverned, whereby there is the absence of government, there is the absence of authority, and people can easily carve out sphere of influence for themselves. And when that starts, it succeeds in one place, is replicated in other places, and so on and so on. Before you know it, you have problems scattered all over the place. So there must be decisive actions in that to reach to a level whereby this reconciliation and so on take place. At the end of the day, it's people talking to one another. It's communities engaging one another and agreeing and deciding that they want to evolve measures or means through which they're going to live peacefully.
Which has not been done so far.
Well, you find it in various disparate areas. Like we still go back to Borno, where this is practiced, and to a large extent there's success to a level. But every region is unique in its way. We have to look at what is likely to work there, study it, and have a kind of homegrown solution that is going to be applicable to that region.
All right, Wing Commander Awal, thank you very much. Dr. Kabir Adamu, I think we just have a few minutes to go. Your concluding remarks, but what can the people of Goza, and by extension the people of Borno State, do in order not to award a psychological victory to terrorists?
Okay, I want to emphasize or bring to the fore that we have a coordinator of counter-terrorism whose office is embedded inside the office of the National Security Advisor. And what he does is to coordinate policy implementation on counter-terrorism across the country. My closing remarks, in addition to answering the question that you've just mentioned, is we need to do three things. Prevent the ability of the terrorist groups to generate funding, their ability to recruit, and then their ability to access weapons. once we do these 3 things, we would have the oxygen that allows them to propagate would have been stopped. And once you stop someone from getting oxygen, automatically that group will die. Now, for the people of Goza, and of course for Borno State as a whole, glorifying terrorism is the oxygen that allows it to grow. So we need to condemn in its totality this action. In no way should we do the simple thing of blaming, as it were, the government. Yes, there are failures, but as a people, let's understand that that failure is something that we all need to own. The responsible party is the terrorist. They are the ones who came and killed people, and that's the message. Let's condemn that killing. Let's condemn anyone who contributed or had any support. There are 3 principal things that can help us in understanding that terrorism is rooted in either political reasons, criminal reasons, or the 3rd one, political, criminal, or social reasons. And if we understand that, then it will help us in coming to the end, as it were, of the activities of this group. And I think Wing Commander has mentioned a lot, including those grievances and socio-economic conditions. But like I mentioned, the coordinator counter-terrorism that is in the Office of the National Security Advisor coordinates these things. So we are hoping that we would see, apart from the statement that was released by the President, which by the way is commendable, he has, as a leader, he has given direction on what we should do. So that's the kind of messaging that that center can take down to the people of Goza and the people of Borno State, so that the entire government machinery rallies around that message.
Okay, Wing Commander Salmana, your final thoughts in 30 seconds, please.
So my final thoughts is that Goza should see this as a challenge and should in wholeheartedly tell the terrorists or whoever they are that they cannot succeed. So go out there, of course, with all caution and so on, but go about your business while government take care of the security down there. We only give them an idea of triumph when you cow to their dastardly acts. So they must not see or would seem to have succeeded. They have caused a small degrade or whatever, but we must not cow to their terrorist acts.
Yes, indeed. I spoke to some people in Goza and they told me they are not going anywhere.
Exactly.
They're going to stay.
They'll be.
Yes, they're going to stay in Goza because they just returned after years of insurgency and they are not leaving. And I believe that is the spirit.
Exactly. That should be the spirit.
Yeah, that should be the spirit, yes.
Yeah.
Life is beautiful. I wonder how somebody can just kill him or herself. Well, gentlemen, as always, Dr. Kabir Adamu, it's been a pleasure having you on this program as always. Security and Management Risk Expert. Thank you so much for your input. Wing Commander Musa Salmanu, retired Development, Peace and Security Expert. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. And we will also join from Maiduguri by Professor Osman Tar, Commissioner, Ministry of Information and Internal Security in Borno State. He has gone on to other engagements. Thank you so much for your time. We hope you learned a lot. And please, Nigerians, be alert. Watch out. Thank you so much. I am Jumma Yusuf.
Right, and I'm Victor Azu. Tomorrow is another day. Let's keep the date. Good morning.